Hello there and welcome once again to The Verdict. I'm Mick Cornett along with Kent Meyers. We're here every week meeting interesting people and dealing with topical issues, and welcome back one of our most frequent and favorite guests.
Yes, our guest today is going to be Berry Tramel from the Oklahoman. Berry is making his 15th appearance on the show. He is probably going to morph into one of the hosts before long. He comes on so often, and that would be good for everyone except Berry. Berry is going to be talking about all the activities going on in the sports world. He probably could do 3 shows and not cover everything, but we're going to do our best to get through one.
There is a lot going on, especially in college football in this state. So we'll be back with Berry Tramel after this.
Right now, 6 feet can feel like a long ways away. But from 6 feet, we can still smile at each other. From our doorways and our stairways, from opposite sides of the street and opposite sides of the country. Through fear and frustrations, we can remind each other that we are still here for each other. Because we can still smile at each other. And we're not going anywhere.
Military service ran in my blood, starting from my father, which joined the Navy, on the Chickasaw side, my uncle, which served in the United States Army. I'm Benjamin Espinosa, Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy, and I'm Chickasaw. I went to the Secretary of Defense's staff at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., which ultimately led to becoming a combat support technician for Naval Special Warfare, specifically SEAL Team 10. I think to be proud and to love your tribe, to love being Chickasaw, you also have to love being American. You also have to love everything that America stands for. Equality, perseverance, professionalism, and power. I want my family to know that their father is a good person, but also feels that he has an obligation to the country and to love this nation. Anything worth having is worth dying for. The military and the country owes me nothing. I owe it everything.
See more stories about the Chickasaw people at profilesofanation.com.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Meyers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Well, as Mick indicated, we are really pleased to welcome back for the 15th time Berry Tramel. Come bring us up to date on what's going on in the sports world, and heaven knows there is a lot going on. A brief introduction, Berry was a Norman native, is a Norman native. First started his sports writing at the Norman Transcript, and then for the last 30 years, he's been with the Oklahoman. I'll say this, he won't, but he is generally recognized as the premier sports writer in at least Oklahoma, if not beyond. Berry, sure glad to have you. Thanks for coming back.
Glad to be here, guys.
Yeah. Well, you know, it hadn't been that long since we had you on, but it seems like the entire world of college football has changed in the state of Oklahoma.
Well, I mean, it's all turned upside down, and you know, you literally have to check the internet about every 30 minutes to see what else is new. You know, it's bad enough in the summer when we had the NIL explosion, and we had the 12-team college football playoff proposal, and then we had OU and Texas going to the SEC. But now all those things have just gone haywire after what was an interesting college football season. And you got people going, you got people coming, you got different teams, rising to the top. Sooners fall from grace after 6 years of winning the Big 12. So everything's changed.
I was surprised when the head coach left at Oklahoma. Did that catch you by surprise as it did me?
I would not have been terribly surprised if Lincoln Riley had gone to the NFL. I still think he'll end up in the NFL. He's well sought after by the NFL. He's got a great offensive mind. I was stunned, though, that he went to another university. I didn't see that. Southern Cal's a great job, no doubt about that. They've been down for better part of a decade, but clearly there's a lot of potential there. But what he's trying to get built at USC is what he had at Oklahoma. You know, I tend to think he just didn't want to go to the SEC. It's going to be easier to achieve his goals at USC than it would be at Oklahoma in the SEC. So I still was surprised, though, because you know, he talked a lot about the loyalty factor and the opportunity that he was given. You know, literally 7 years ago, 7 years and 2 months ago, he was calling plays at East Carolina, you know, trying to beat Temple in the rain. And 2.5 years after that, he was handed the head coaching job of a star-studded team at Oklahoma. Bob Stoops really set him up and for great success. And you know, he stayed for 5 seasons, and that was it. So I was surprised that he walked away from that. But you know, it's a free country, so you should never be too surprised at what people do.
What about Venables? Is that a good hire?
Well, I like the hire. I mean, it checks every Sooner box. Okay. You know, Oklahoma historically has not hired a head coach. Last time they hired a sitting head coach, they've hired a sitting head coach once since 1936, and that was Howard Schnellenberger in 1995. Jim Tatum in 1946 had been a head coach at North Carolina. He was no longer the head coach at North Carolina. So OU always goes young, sharp assistant. Bud Wilkinson, Jim McKenzie, Chuck Fairbanks, Barry Switzer, Bob Stoops, Lincoln Riley. You know, that's their model. Now, Brent Venables is a little older. Brent's 50. We still think of him as that eternally.
Still looks young.
He still looks young. That's, you know, he hadn't been around that much. We still think of him as that guy with his, you know, the veins popping out of his neck and screaming at the defense. But he's 50 years old now, and so he's much more experienced. The thing you got to like about Brent is he's been around now 3 ultra-successful coaches for extended periods of time. He's not a vagabond. He hasn't jumped around. He was at Kansas State for 8 years as a player or coach under Bill Snyder, who I consider the greatest coach in the history of college football. And then he's at OU with Bob Stoops for 12 years. And now for the last 10 years, he's been at Clemson with Dabo Swinney, who's had incredible success. So he's very stable, but he's got great experience. He's got the OU ties. He's gotten everybody excited. You know, here, the one thing we've learned in the last month or so is people's devotion to Bob Stoops and how Bob's able to get everybody settled and moving in the right direction now, just as he did 20 years ago. And the ties to Stoops really has people excited, bringing back Jerry Schmidt, you know, retaining some of the players, some of the coaches who played for Stoops and Venables. So in many ways, it's a perfect fit. He's been a top-notch candidate for years and years. Nobody's got him to bite. Auburn, in particular, a year ago thought it was going to hire Brent Venables. He never jumped, and finally he has, and he's jumped to Norman.
Well, what is your expectation about retaining players?
Well, it's difficult for any coach to retain players. It's difficult for longtime coaches to retain players. Free agency has come to college football. These guys have the freedom to leave at no penalty. They can go play immediately, and so many of them do. It's, you know, the truth of the matter is this is not a college football thing. It's not even a university thing. It's not an athletic thing. It's an American society thing.
It's a free enterprise thing.
People of a certain age, younger than 40, they're migratory these days. People don't stay in one place. You know, like me, you mentioned I was born in Norman. I still live on the same side of Norman in which I was born. A whole lot of people my generation are that way. People who are 20, 25, 30, that's not the way they're wired. They move around. You see that in the professional ranks. You see that with non-athletes. People just tend to move more. And we're seeing that with college football. So it's tough to keep guys, even if they're your guys, even if you brought them in. If you're a new coach, it's a tough thing. Brent Venables has a tough assignment, trying to convince as many of these guys as possible not to enter the portal, to believe in his vision for OU football, and to stick with the program. And most of them will stay, but a few will leave.
The portal just sent us a quarterback from Florida, I understand.
Yeah, Central. You know, Caleb Williams entered the portal. We don't know if he's going to come back or not, but it took OU about 4 hours to get a commitment from maybe the best quarterback in the portal before Caleb Williams. That's Dillon Gabriel, a very good quarterback at Central Florida for 2 years, 19 and 20. This past season, he broke his clavicle in Game 3, missed the rest of the year, but an excellent quarterback and probably not as good as Caleb Williams, but still very good. To me, it shows the power of Oklahoma that, you know, you lose a guy or potentially lose a guy, and literally within 4 hours, you've got maybe the best replacement you could get. So that's a very good sign. There's not a lot of quarterback depth in Norman. Brent Venables needs a quarterback. It looks like he's got a bird in the hand with Dillon Gabriel, no matter what Caleb Williams does.
Yeah. Well, if you're a coach, how do you acquire kids in the portal? It almost seems like, I'm sure there's some unwritten rule, if not a written rule, that you can't be recruiting players who are currently enrolled at other schools. But I'm not naive into thinking that that's not playing out somehow, some way. So it almost sounds like a different skill set, a different strategy, a different off season. Do you even look at film of the spring game anymore? Or are you spending all your time going through the roster of other schools?
Well, you have people on your staff that are following all this. And, you know, we've created this portal as being this mystical machine, like a time machine or something. You know,
I've seen it in Fanville.
Yeah, exactly, in Fanville. That's the image people have. The portal is nothing but a list. That's really all it is. It's a sign-up sheet. Are you interested in transferring? Sign right here. If you sign there, you go into a computer, spreadsheet, and if you're a kid from OU and you go in the portal, that means somebody at Montana State, somebody at South Carolina, somebody at Rhode Island, somebody at Texas, all sees it and say, hey, check out this guy. Now, if Caleb Williams goes into the portal, everybody knows who Caleb Williams is. But, maybe a running back from Tennessee, Eric Gray, came to OU this past season. He goes on the portal. OU, somebody in Norman says, hey, a Tennessee tailback is in the portal. Let's check him out. They'll find film on him in 10 minutes. In 30 minutes, they'll decide whether they want to pursue it, because this portal recruiting goes very fast. And so they get about the business of deciding whether to offer these guys a scholarship or not. So it's very much like high school recruiting, except on overdrive.
Yeah.
Is really what it is.
We need to get to a break, but is there a restriction in Big 12? Can you
No restrictions.
No restrictions.
No
Okay.
restrictions.
We'll
No
be right
restrictions.
back. Berry Tramel's our guest on The Verdict.
When I came to work for the ODVA, I started realizing the opportunity to take care of veterans. It's a powerful thing when you realize that you are taking care of people that made history.
Working here is a calling. It's really, really important that they don't just come here to exist. We want to give them meaning to their lives. We try to make life happy and meaningful and fulfilled for our veterans.
OU Law has a history and heritage that are unparalleled. At the University of Oklahoma College of Law, we empower our students to pursue the career of their dreams. We have the highest U.S. News ranking ever achieved by an Oklahoma law school. We are the first law school in the country to launch a college-wide digital initiative. And this year, our competition teams rank number 2 in the nation. OU Law, generations of excellence, limitless possibilities.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett, Kent Meyers, our guest, Berry Tramel.
Barry, we spent the first half of this show talking about the plight of OU, or the accomplishments at OU, depending on how you look at it. What about OSU's performance in their bowl game?
Well, it was a monumental game. Mike Gundy called it the biggest win in school history. I'd probably not go that far. I might rank it second or third, but second or third still. They've been playing football 130 years in Stillwater. So just an unbelievable season for the Cowboys and a great win. You beat Notre Dame 37-35. Here's the way to look at it. How often does OSU get a chance to play Notre Dame, especially on equal footing? Now, you know, sometimes Notre Dame will have a subpar year, get in the Cheez-It Bowl or something. They played Iowa State 2 or 3 years ago in Orlando, the Cheez-It Bowl. And that was great for Iowa State. But to get Notre Dame on a big stage like the Fiesta Bowl, when both teams are top 10, that doesn't happen very often for OSU. And for them to respond the way they did, the Cowboys trail by 21, come back and win, biggest comeback in school history, the start of a Notre Dame era. They've got the new coach, Marcus Freeman, just hired in December. So, and to spoil the Notre Dame launch of an era that they're so excited about, and in the way they did with such a comeback, just capped a great season. You know, it'd been great for OSU to beat Baylor in that Big 12 title game. You always want to be the champion, but the truth is, it was better for OSU to go to Phoenix and play Notre Dame in the Fiesta than to go to Ole Miss and play Ole Miss in the Sugar Bowl, because the stakes and the profile so much higher. So just a wonderful season for the Cowboys, and just, you know, another feather in the cap for Mike Gundy, who has really built an excellent program. You know, we've been talking, I've been researching for years, and the last 10, 12 years, OSU clearly is the #2 program in the Big 12 in terms of success. I did some research today. In this century, which is now 22 seasons old, 21st century college football, among strictly Power 5 schools, OSU's number 18 in wins. So this is a top 20 program in every regard, and just should be just getting even better for the Cowboys.
What should we think of Mike Gundy as a head football coach? He seems to have matured. You can see some personality changes. But when you start looking at his longevity at a school that generally did not have longevity with successful coaches, he's almost in a class by himself in OSU history.
Well, he's clearly the best football coach in OSU history. You know, Mike's sort of funny because, you know, you guys have been around as long as I have. You know, we didn't grow up with Mike Gundy, but he's literally been around for 40 years. I mean, in 1984.
I saw him play in the 9th grade.
In 1984, he's the quarterback at Midwest City, and they got a great team. So we've literally been following this guy for 38 years now. Mm-hmm. And we've seen him go from cocky quarterback to brash assistant coach to inexperienced head coach who does some goofy things. And, you know, I'll say it, he still does some goofy things. But he's a heck of a head coach. He's built a great program. You know, OSU is not the level of Kansas State's, you know, despair. But OSU football did not have great tradition. And, you know, he's turned them into a top 20 program. And year after year, they're competitive and they do interesting and great things. And you talked about the longevity. There's only one coach in college football, major college football, with longer longevity than Mike Gundy, and that's Kirk Ferentz at Iowa. And in 2005, Gundy was hired at OSU. Kyle Whittingham was hired at Utah. Kyle was actually hired a couple of weeks before Gundy, but they're tied for second in the longest longevity. So the stability is great. Mm-hmm. His assistants don't tend to leave. He keeps most of his assistants for a long time. So they've really got a good thing going at Oklahoma State.
You said something in the first part of the show that you think Bill Snyder's the greatest college football coach in history. What did he do? I know the losing attitude there for many, many years changed to a winning attitude. But how did he bring that about? What did Bill Snyder do that nobody else could do at Kansas State and few people can do anywhere?
Well, for one thing, he is unbelievable with details.
Yeah.
And nobody ever worked harder, and his assistants worked hard, and many of them left because, you know, to ask for half a day off in the middle of June they just didn't do it. They didn't risk it because he wouldn't do it and he'd be mad at him. So he worked incredibly hard, his details, and he played the long game. I mean, he didn't say, here's where we're going to be in 4 years. He said, this is where we're going to be tomorrow. This is what we're going to do today so we can get to this point tomorrow. And tiny bit by bit, he built a program. And he built up the confidence, he built up the facilities, he built up the talent to where they became a really good football program. great at times. You know, they've won 2 Big 12 titles, or they won 2 Big 12 titles under Bill Snyder. Could have won some more, contended for a national championship. He just built it the old-fashioned way, without any bells and whistles. He just built it with hard work.
And they were a laughingstock.
Oh, the worst.
Yeah.
They were the worst. They were the worst. We're not talking, I mean, we're talking about, you know, despair, you know, terrible facilities, no fan support, players with no confidence. Bob Stoops talks about it when he went with Bill Snyder to Manhattan in 1989. Just the lack of anything to build upon. Just, I mean, he said he couldn't even walk into the facility with good shoes because, you know, there's mud everywhere, and if it rained, it was just a mess. He said there was no pride, is what it was. There was no pride, and Bill Snyder got in there and he decided he's instilling pride. And with help like Bob Stoops and a litany of other longtime coaches, they built something from nothing. And it's something to really be exemplary for any coach, that anything's possible if you can build a football program at Kansas State.
Before you get out of here, I want to talk to you about the Thunder. And I read the story in the Oklahoman about the cap and how they're under the cap. What did all that mean? I don't know that anyone in that story proposed. Here's what this means.
Well, if you remember, go back to the Carmelo Anthony days from 3 or 4 years ago, and all the luxury tax the Thunder was paying. They were, you know, their payroll costs were in the $160 million range, for crying out loud. Well, miracles, they got out from under that. So now there's a cap. There's something you can't go over without paying tax. There's also a floor. You can't go under it without a penalty. The Thunder's under the floor, so they're going to have to pay some more salary. But they've arranged their finances to where going forward they have all kinds of options. And the rebuilding is difficult. Nobody likes it. We don't like it. We don't want to watch a team that's tanking. It's no fun to watch the Thunder need to lose. You know, when Lou Dort shoots a shot, I want it to go in. I don't want to sit here thinking miss. And that's sort of what you have to do when you're tanking. But you know, to me, the future's bright because of all those draft picks, and they've hit on so many things. Josh Giddey, the rookie, for crying out loud, he's a wonderful player. People say he can't really shoot. The NBA better hope he can't shoot, because if he can, he's the best player in the league, because he does everything else wonderfully at the age of 19, for crying out loud. So Dort's turned into a player. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is on the on the rise to stardom. So they've got the good base. Another draft or two, and the Thunder's going to be back in business.
Talk about the new football coach at Central State.
Well, he's a wonderful addition to UCO. He won national titles at Northwest Missouri State. Went into the Division I ranks down in Abilene at Abilene Christian. It's a tough gig. It didn't work out, but for UCO to grab a coach like that with national championship credentials, you know, UCO's in the business of getting things done here in recent years. Their facilities are marvelous. They're in a wonderful conference, and they've been sort of middle of the road for the last 6, 7, 8 years. But I think they're ready to take this next step, and they've got a coach now that can get it done. He's proven he can get it done, and I think the future is very bright for the Broncos.
All right, we're going to have to get out of here. Win fast, Berry. Thanks as always.
You bet.
Thank you so much.
Berry Tramel, our guest on The Verdict today. We'll be right back with the final word.
It used to be okay in teachers' lounges. It used to be okay in maternity wards. It was okay in sporting arenas, college campuses, and office spaces. But now that we understand the deadly dangers of secondhand smoke, that's not okay anymore. So why is it okay that thousands of employees are exposed to it every day at work? Bottom line, it's not okay. Let's protect hardworking Oklahomans. Join the fight at stopswithme.com.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be Mom and Dad to me.
I think for us, once we got started and we began to see the tremendous need just within our state, it really was just a calling for us. The blessings far outweigh any obstacles that we've faced.
You will always be Mom and Dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. I was looking at the bumper that you came up with there, the unusual. They kind of have two bowl names.
Well, they really do. Well,
Yeah.
I really worked hard to put together these the bumpers for this particular show with the number of stupid bowl names that I had to pick from. It was hard to make the selection.
Well, Barry's a great guest, and I hope our audience enjoyed it. I'm sure they did, and wish they had tuned in earlier if they only got in halfway. But we have some website information for you to see Barry's columns. He's obviously in the Oklahoman, theoklahoman.com, not the Oklahoman.com. And our website, theverdict.tv, opportunities for people to go online and check out a guest they'd like to see or a subject they'd like to discuss. And you know, I think we just have Barry on like every other week. I mean, the show goes so fast. I would have sworn that those segments were half as long as they were.
It seemed like it, and I can remember when Barry first came on, he had a full head of brown hair.
30 years at the Oklahoman. Congratulations to him, and congratulations to the Oklahoman for keeping him so long. That's going to do it for this week's show. We're so glad you joined us, and as always, be sure and let us know about a guest you'd like to see on a future edition of The Verdict, and Kent and I'll be back to interview that person and tell more wonderful news about the state of Oklahoma. We'll see you next week.